Hello and welcome to my channel, I Win to Lose Gaming. Lanyan is here! Woohoo! Let's see how good of a character Lanyan is in today's video with various different builds and weapons. This is Lanyan, the newest 4-star character in Genshin Impact, and she's here to surprisingly add a bit of variety to our ever-expanding roster of misfits. Now, we already have many shielders to choose from, and in fact we also have many Anemo Catalyst characters, 4 to be exact. So what makes Lanyan special? Well, she's our first Anemo Catalyst Shielder in the game! Woohoo! Now, is she just another random 4-star destined to be forgotten, or does she stand out in some unique ways? That's what we'll hopefully try to answer in today's video. Starting off, my Lanyan is using the Thrilling Tales of Dragon Slayers with the 4-piece Viridescent Veneer with attack percent, and attack percent main stats. Her talents are at a paltry 6, 6, and 7, and she's starting at Constellation 0 at the beginning of this video. Lanyan's kit is relatively simple, especially compared to some of her contemporary peers. Her basic attacks are stubby but deal Anemo damage and appear to have standard ICD. She also has a charged attack and it exists. As for her elemental skill, she'll dash forward and create a shield, and then she'll bounce up a bit, where you can toss a chakram at the enemy. If your shield comes in contact with a pyro, electro, cryo, or hydro entity, then Lanyan will create an infused shield. This infused shield will also absorb the infused element with 250% efficiency, making it very durable against whatever element that it might have infused. Notably, this initial bonk that creates the shield does not do any damage, nor does it apply Anemo. And in order for her shield to be infused, it must contact another entity with an element. As we can see in this clip, despite Lanyan being infused with pyro, she did not infuse herself with a pyro shield. In this clip, Lanyan has pyro on her and bonked into the robot chicken with cryo on it, and Lanyan ended up with a pyro shield. So yeah, you need to bonk into an enemy to infuse her shield. After bouncing back, you can toss this chakram, which hits up to 3 times, bouncing between multiple enemies if there are multiple enemies, or just all hitting a single target. Another interesting note is that if you infuse an element for your shield, these chakrams will also deal 50% of the chakram's damage as the infused element. Upon performing this chakram attack, she'll create, I believe, 3 Anemo particles, and the chakram actually applies Anemo first before the element. And if there's only one enemy, despite hitting the same enemy 3 times, it just swirls a single time, indicating that these chakrams probably have standard ICD. This series of events actually makes her an interesting swirler with some unique options which we'll get into later. She also has a hold version of her skill which can be used to ka-ching around the overworld or to just aim your shield bonk. Unfortunately, it's got a rather short 12-second duration. Fortunately though, because Viridescent Veneer only has a 10-second duration, Anemo characters often go right before the DPS character, and thus the shield will typically last through most of the DPS character's rotation. As for the strength of the shield, it's kind of hit or miss. Since my Lanyan's skill is only at level 6, and with the Thrilling Tales, the damage it absorbs is pretty modest, with a base absorption of 10,938 damage, and a pretty solid 27,346 versus the infused element. To put this into perspective, a common Favonius Zhongli build's shield has around 23,500 HP, and of course it is unconditional. As we can see, the Hydrotulpa still easily punched through Lanyan's shield and killed her. Hilariously enough though, Bennett's attack buff also improves her shield, at least I'm pretty sure, as we can see her shield lasting significantly longer against Valen and having an effective 39,124 HP on paper thanks to Bennett's attack buff. Along with some more levels to her skill and her Constellation 2, we could see literally the most comically durable shield in the game, upwards of absorbing around 124,000 damage against the infused element. Admittingly, you won't have infusion bonus most of the time, but this amount of durability is pretty funny to me. As for her burst, it's pretty straightforward. It's got some decent multipliers, a tiny bit of grouping with good AoE, and it will swirl a single time. Needless to say, with the support build it won't be doing much damage at all, but as we can see in her trial, it can be quite good against groups of weak enemies that are vulnerable to mass swirl. And finally, her remaining passive provides a modest increase to her skill and burst damage based on her elemental mastery stat, and her exploration passive allows you to ambush those pesky little buggy flies in the overworld. Now really quick, let's take a quick look at a DPS build with an Anemo Goblet, Crit Circlet, and the Widsid. Well, maybe with some talent levels and constellations, her skill and burst can do some notable damage, but as of her paltry 667 talent levels, she's missing a ton of her damage and her damage doesn't look all that impressive right now. Now, teams is where Lanyan is a really interesting character, and frankly, it's incredible that she's going to be a free character selectable in the Lantern Rite event. One teammate for her where she really stands out for is none other than Arlecchino. Arlecchino has survivability issues due to not being able to be healed by her teammates, and she doesn't really have super armor. Lanyan helps patch these issues up by, well, providing a shield. In fact, Lanyan's unique Anemo application allows her to swirl both Pyro and Hydro here, since her basic attack is fast enough to actually hit the enemy before Xingqiu's water swords connect with them. Then her skill's follow-up chakrams not only swirl the Hydro that's now on the enemy, but they also apply Hydro, allowing for Arlecchino to immediately start vaping. Granted, of course Sucrose can do something very similar, as well as equip the Thrilling Tails. And we can see with Sucrose that the first vape hit for 171,376 damage in comparison to with Lanyan where it was 129,875 damage. Funnily enough, despite this huge damage differential between the vaped hits, they still cleared this fight within basically 1 second of each other, thanks to a good chunk of the damage still coming from non-vaped hits. Now perhaps if this fight was a bit longer, Sucrose's higher damage might matter a bit more, but considering Lanyan also gives Arlecchino a shield, this is a great alternative to Sucrose. Now another great team where Lanyan works well is in an aggravate team, allowing you to much more comfortably bypass a healer and run Nahida with 2 Electro DPS characters. The shield plus optional prototype Amber on Lanyan makes this still a reasonably robust team in comparison to, say, let's say just Sucrose with the prototype Amber or Kazuha who doesn't heal at all. Not only that, but being able to use Nahida is a massive damage boost in comparison to, for example, using other Dendro characters. Granted, Sucrose again will provide more damage for this team, but Lanyan provides the comfort as well as, well, you know, the shield, which is very valuable. Now a team where she's just straight up better than Sucrose is in most Neuvillette teams. Neuvillette teams are often played as mono Hydro, and thus reactions aren't much of a thing, and thus Sucrose's elemental mastery buff doesn't help. So you may as well take Lanyan's shield, which helps a lot with Constellation 0 Neuvillette from getting interrupted by enemy attacks. Heck, if you have a spare Starcaller's Dream, you can slap it on Lanyan to provide its bonus damage buff to Neuvillette. Now, please don't reference this b-roll for how much damage you can expect to do with your Neuvillette, because all the 5 stars in this team are at C6R5, but this is just to demonstrate the fact that Lanyan works with Neuvillette and is not an accurate reflection of how much damage you will do. Finally, a Sacrificial Fragments Lanyan with Elemental Mastery main stats across the board is also a very viable taser driver, performing similarly to a prototype Amber Sucrose. The Elemental Mastery that Sucrose provides is very helpful for taser damage since it's team-wide, but needless to say, just like literally any other teams with reactions that you can choose between Sucrose or Lanyan, Lanyan is a great comfort pick, and you can build her with Sacrificial Fragments for more swirl damage and shield uptime, or with the prototype Amber for some actual healing for this team. Granted, her shield here is going to be pretty flimsy, but still, it's still a shield. Honestly, it's hard for me to say who is now better for this role, but knowing that she's competitive to a character like Sucrose for a taser specifically gives us another great alternative playstyle for Lanyan. Monopyro teams such as Monopyro Arlecchino and especially Monopyro Linny really appreciate Lanyan's shield, because otherwise they will get easily interrupted, and nothing feels worse than using a charged attack character and getting interrupted near the end of your charged attack. The fact that Lanyan just provides a shield is what makes her unique, and well, she is our first Anemo Shielder after all. And just for fun, let's push Lanyan's damage to the limit with the Widsith, my Constellation 3 Plus Fiorina, and my Constellation 6 Farazan. Frankly, max talent levels and at Constellation 6 Lanyan, she might actually be able to single rotation the Robot Chicken, but yeah, I don't recommend this build in comparison to how broken modern day DPS characters are, but this is still pretty fun and also funny to see. So yeah, literally any team, or almost any team, that can utilize an Anemo Swirler can utilize Lanyan's ability to equip the Viridescent Veneer along with the Thrilling Tales of Dragon Slayers. Then you just slap a shield on top of that and you have Lanyan. Granted, I have to be completely honest, she doesn't feel like a massive upgrade over our current 4-star Catalyst options like Heizo and Sucrose. In fact, Lanyan and Heizo are very similar, with Lanyan providing a shield and Heizo providing 80 elemental mastery instead. Also, Kazuha is generally better than Lanyan despite the lack of the shield because of his grouping and incredible swirl setups, and around 40% bonus damage, but just the fact that I'm willing to compare Kazuha to Lanyan in the same sentence is a testament to how solid she is, or more specifically, how solid the Viridescent Veneer, Thrilling Tales, and a shield are. Also, Lanyan's constellations and leveling her talents will actually significantly boost her damage. Her multipliers are pretty reasonable for a 4-star character, and her constellations help with that, potentially even allowing her to contribute a bit more to the team than just Swirl and the fact that she can equip the Thrilling Tales. Now the big constellation for her overall though is Constellation 2, and as we can see by refreshing her shield with basic attacks, her shield is essentially unbreakable against the previously fatal Hydrotolpa. Then we have her Constellation 4, which gives 60 Elemental Mastery on Burst, which will help her further close the gap to Sucrose. And finally, her Constellation 6 will give her an extra skill charge, allowing for either more decent skill damage, more particles, or much better shield uptime by staggering its usage. Overall, Lanyan is a very solid free-to-play friendly 4-star character, assuming you pick her up in the upcoming event or I guess pull for her on one of these banners. But ultimately, she does still feel like a 4-star character. And while it's true she is arguably just a side grade to someone like Sucrose, her role is unique right now, being able to consolidate Anemo, Catalyst, and Shielder all in one. Let me know what you think about Lanyan down in the comments below. As always, I appreciate every single one of you. This is I Went to Lose, signing out.